My friends, the game is on. Heck yeah, heck yeah. I'm so freaking excited. Okay, I gotta calm down. I'm sorry. It's just, I live for this stuff. I love Sherlock Holmes stuff. It just makes me happy. And this whole show has made me happy, but an entire episode focused on the Sherlock crew, I'm a happy boy. But with that said, hello everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another one of our weekly Moriarty the Patriot discussion videos. Today we're going to be talking all about episode 8, A Study in S. I almost said Scarlet. A Study in S part 1, or act 1 rather. But before we get into that, quick reminder if you haven't done so yet to hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, set notifications to all, let all of AnyTube know that you're here. But with that said, let's go ahead and jump right into it. And guys, I am over the moon right now. I am so happy. I love Sherlock Holmes stuff. I've mentioned it before. So to have a show like Moriarty the Patriot in general is great. But actually having an episode that's focused on Sherlock and Watson and Mrs. Hudson and Lestrade. They even put Lestrade in here. Friggin' Stamford is in here. Stamford of all characters. It's just, yeah, it does the heart good. And I am very, very, very happy to see like the crew represented so well. Like they absolutely nailed it, from casting to just the character designs themselves to the way that the characters act. It's so on point, and I'm so happy that they really like nailed it. Especially Watson. Like Watson is so good. In fact, let's talk a little bit about Watson, his design, how the Seiyu portrays him, and all that fun stuff. So first off, let me just say that Yuki Ono absolutely brings it as Watson. I will say, like, at first I was surprised because the voice isn't totally what I thought. I thought that they would have gone for a more sort of like aloof character, but I'm really happy that Ono delivers a performance where you can tell that Watson is strong. He's a strong character. He's well put together. He understands the danger that he's getting into. It's not like he's stumbling into this. After all, like, he is a medic, right? He's a field medic, and he was like discharged from the military, so he would have experience not just in saving lives, but also ending lives. And Ono absolutely brings it for the role of Watson. Like, I just think the performance is great, the direction of the character is great, everything about it was fantastic. There's immediate chemistry between him and Holmes, which is like very noticeable. There's this saying when it comes to like a lot of like Sherlock adaptations that the whole thing will be made or broken depending on how the dynamics of the actors playing Holmes and Watson are. Right? Like, typically a lot of actors who play the Holmes and Watson roles end up becoming friends because of it, which is very wholesome and sweet and everything, but it's also meant to say that if you don't nail that dynamic, the whole thing falls apart. And Yuki Ono as Watson and Makoto Furukawa as Holmes are great. There is like immediate chemistry between them, like very, very fast chemistry. And thank goodness, right? Because you really, really need that when it comes to these two characters. Like, you need them to hit it off. It needs to feel like that this was almost fate, right? Like, there is a degree of fate when it comes to Sherlock and Watson. And I don't just mean the shipping thing. If you want to ship Sherlock and Watson, that's cool. I do too. But like, if you want to see it that way, it's fine. But even if you're just looking at it from the perspective of like, these are two people who are meant to work together in some capacity, Sherlock and Watson are synonymous with partnership, right? Like, they are synonymous. They are the dream team. Like, in most fiction, you know, like when you think of two fictional partners, you might think of Sherlock and Watson almost immediately. So you have to nail that immediate connection, and it is so perfectly nailed. I have to give credit to Yuki Ono and Makoto Furukawa, and I know I'm going on and on and on about this, but like, this matters a lot to me. I really love Sherlock stories, and I was so nervous about how they were going to handle Watson, and it's flawless. Let's actually transition a bit though to talk about the character design of Watson, because I think it's really, really solid. So when we see Watson, we see him with the friggin' cane, which I was like, of course he's rocking the cane, of course he is. And I love the cane. Like, the cane to me is like, that's how Watson has to start. He has to start with the cane. He has to have been injured in battle. And I know that that's like the whole point, right? He was discharged, so of course he'd have the cane. But the cane to me is so, it signifies like, Watson is broken. He is hurt from his experiences in the war. So when he comes home and he is met with Sherlock Holmes. Holmes, when he comes home, when he meets Sherlock Holmes, that crutch that he uses, like that cane, eventually goes away because he no longer needs it. Like Sherlock makes him feel stronger, like he can push forward without the cane. And I think the cane to me is very much like a key signifier of how Watson starts, and I love that they kept it. The silver hair is so perfect, right? Because again, it makes me think of Martin Freeman, who is my favorite Watson, like, of all time. Martin Freeman is just one of my favorite actors in general. But yeah, like it does remind me of Martin Freeman a bit. But I think silver hair with Watson is just perfect, whether it's gray or silver or what have you. It's distinguished, but I like that this Watson's silver hair, while yes, it is distinguished, it's also sort of messy. So it shows that he's like a bit rough and tumble, right? Like, yes, he's sophisticated. Yes, he's a bit classy. You know, he's swelled, right? Like, he's very suave. Like, he's sophisticated. There's an air of sophistication to the character, but he has, you know, he can tussle, right? He can get rough and tumble if he needs to. So hence the messy hair. He's a bit of a messy person. Like, not so much in the way that he lives, but just like his life is a bit of a mess when we first meet Watson. So the messy hair, I think, is perfect. Brown eyes are typically shown to be dependable, right? Like, brown eyes are sort of conceived as basic, and I say that as a dude with brown eyes. So believe me, I know it's kind of sucks to hear brown eyes are basic, but they are. But when I say basic, I don't necessarily mean it as an insult. I mean it more in as much as, like, basic means like you can always rely on them to have your back. Character designs with brown eyes are either like a bland character design or meant to be a dependable character design. And when it comes to friggin' John Watson, yeah, that's definitely a dependable type. They're nodding more towards John being incredibly dependable. So I've rambled on a lot about Watson. I admit that, like, I can't help it. It's just the way he connects with Sherlock is so good. I absolutely love the dynamic between Sherlock and Watson, and I'll get more into Sherlock in just a sec. Also want to talk a little bit about Mrs. Hudson, who I think I was surprised with. I'll admit that I was kind of shocked. The design is not quite what I had thought they were going to go with. It's she's rocking this like pink dress. Pink, obviously, again, as we've described, very feminine color. So when you see it on girls, it's typically like, oh, she's a very girly girl type of character. But with Mrs. Hudson, that's not quite the case. The way that they sort of play her here is like a much younger type of Mrs. Hudson than I'm used to. Most Mrs. Hudson characters, they're not like ancient or anything, but Mrs. Hudson is usually older than Sherlock and has usually seen a little bit more, been around the block a few times. You know, seen a bit more of the world than maybe Sherlock has, even though Sherlock is a great mind. She's, you know, a little bit more weary than Sherlock, a little older. This Mrs. Hudson is almost, I want to say, the same age as Watson and Sherlock, which is surprising, right? Like, I'm not used to a Mrs. Hudson who's the same age as John and Sherlock. That's very odd. But I kind of like it, because it sort of makes it feel, for lack of a better word, more anime, right? That Mrs. Hudson's younger. She's actually cute in this version. I'm like, Mrs. Hudson kind of fine in this version. But she's like sweet. I should say she's sweet to John. She's not exactly sweet to Sherlock. She's very tsundere, which again, very anime, I know, but she is a very tsundere type of character. And even though it's like a tsundere version of Mrs. Hudson, she's still immediately recognizable as Mrs. Hudson. Like, everything about her, I'm like, yep, that's Mrs. Hudson, just a little bit younger than I'm used to. And a little bit more tsundere than I'm used to. But for me, the biggest surprise was definitely Lestrade. I was so happy to see Lestrade. Lestrade isn't always a given. I've seen a lot of adaptations that don't have Lestrade. Like, I think that American version with, like, the female Watson doesn't have Lestrade, and to me, I'm like, why would you not have Lestrade? Like, Lestrade's the best. Like, you gotta have a character in Scotland Yard who, like, understands Sherlock and, like, understands why Sherlock is necessary for the Yard and how they help, how Sherlock helps keep justice in London. Like, it's, to me, you need a character like Lestrade, and Lestrade's so great. Like, again, this is another situation where, like, yeah, sure, the show falls off, but it's another area where the BBC Sherlock, I think, really excels. Their version of Lestrade is phenomenal, and it is the version of Lestrade that I judge all other Lestrades by, even the original. Like, Lestrade in this is just, he's almost more strict than I'm used to. Like Greg Lestrade from BBC Sherlock is a bit more like an everyman. Like, he's more of the ride along than Watson is in a lot of situations. Whereas this Lestrade is a lot more sort of like, for lack of a better word, sort of stiff. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he's very by the book, right? He's very much like prim, proper. He does rock the bowler hat, which I'm surprised they didn't give that to Watson. Like, John, I typically associate with the bowler hat, so I was surprised to see it on Lestrade, but it does look good. So not going to complain about that. And again, we've discussed the bowler hat, the difference between the top hat and the bowler hat. So of course, Lestrade would probably rock the bowler hat since he's not quite a noble, and nobles seem to be wearing the top hats in this show. So again, just a little distinction. Like, Lestrade is classy, but he's not as high class as like nobles, right? Like, he does rock the bowler hat, but he's not classy. But he is very much by the book. And I think another interesting note is the blue eyes. Blue is typically as a color is typically associated with security. And, you know, Lestrade being so stiff, again, for lack of a better word, it does fit, right? Like, he is sort of this immovable wall in the sense that he full-heartedly believes in Sherlock. Lestrade believes in Sherlock Holmes. And you can really feel that sort of sense of security that Lestrade brings. Like, when Lestrade visits Sherlock in jail, and we'll get to that in a second, but when Lestrade visits Sherlock in jail and he says, like, you got to be honest with me, did you do this? And Sherlock's like, nope. And Lestrade's like, all right, then let's figure this out. And like, that's perfect. That even though he's a little bit more stiff than the Lestrade that I'm used to, I'm honestly just happy he's here. And I think the way that they depict him is almost probably closer to the book. So I do appreciate that. But yeah, Lestrade being here made me heckin' happy. I was a heckin' happy boy. Even the fact that Stamford is in this. Freaking Stamford is in this. Like, Stamford is, if you didn't know, canon. Like, Stamford is the dude who introduces John and Sherlock. Stamford's in this. Like, that kills me. I absolutely love the attention to detail. And again, like, I've discussed this before, I am a big Sherlock guy. Not so much that I've like read the books or anything. The books is actually probably my blind area, which is kind of ironic since a lot of Sherlock, like a lot of Sherlockians, which is a real word. Well, it's not a real word, but it's what Sherlock fans have called themselves since like the 1800s. But a lot of Sherlockians will have said like that the books are like what you live by. But to me, it's actually the adaptations. Like, I go by the adaptations. And I gotta say, man, like, the depictions of these characters, this might be, like, some of my favorite depictions of these characters. Like, Mrs. Hudson, I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say, this might be my favorite Mrs. Hudson, and I love Mrs. Hudson in, like, a lot of the depictions of her, but, like, this might be my favorite. And this Sherlock is so good. Like, this Sherlock is so great. In fact, let's talk a little bit about Sherlock by actually getting into the mystery this week. Let's talk about A Study in S. Okay, so this did not go the way I thought, but much like a lot of Sherlock mysteries, the evidence was clear. It's just I didn't have the one piece of evidence that I needed to actually solve the friggin' thing. And that mystery is right in front of us, right? A Study in S. They could have called this A Study in Scarlet, right? Like, I believe the phrase, the title, A Study in Scarlet, I believe is open source, like, so you can use it. So I was like, I wonder why they didn't just call it A Study in Scarlet. It's clearly going to be A Study in Scarlet. And it is, and it's not. It's not A Study in Scarlet in the same way that you might remember it. If you remember in A Study in Scarlet, the victim writes, like, R-A-C-H, all capital, right? And so, like, Rach, like, what does that mean? R-A-C-H-E, Rach, what does that mean? And it's, in the original, it's basically a red herring, and it is also a red herring here as well. It's just like, what is written in blood is different, right? So in the original, R-A-C-H-E is written instead of Sherlock. And in the original, it's meant to be like Sherlock realizes that it's the German word for revenge. So maybe that's like that they wrote that they wanted vengeance of some kind, or that this murder was in vengeance of some kind. But again, it was a red herring, doesn't matter. Even in like the new Sherlock, it was also a red herring that they wrote down Rachel, and that they didn't finish writing Rachel. They stopped at E before they died. Here, instead of Reich or Roch or whatever, I don't know how it's pronounced in German. I am so sorry. But instead of Reich, it's Sherlock. They write Sherlock in blood, which was such a shock to me. I was like, whoa! Like, that was such a surprise. In a great way, by the way. Like, it was so cool. I was so like, wow, like I wasn't expecting them to go there, and it was one of those those moments in the show, and we've had a lot of these where it's like, where are they going? Like, what are they gonna do? It's so great. I absolutely I just love this show. Like, you know, like, and to me, I'm like, okay, so like it felt at first like, okay, so for the Moriarty stuff, we know the who done it, we just don't know the why and the how, right? Whereas with this, it's like, okay, we don't know nothing, right? Until the end, where we do find out the who, and of course it's exactly who you think it is. Not so much like necessarily who killed the guy, right? And by the way, even the name is the same. They even kept the name of the victim the exact same from A Study in Scarlet. I love it here. But it's not so much like who actually killed as much as like who's the mastermind behind everything. And of course, you know who it is. Although I do love that moment where Sherlock's like, this is the exact same friggin' thing that happened on the boat. That shot of him like thinking, and you see like clips from the Noatic episodes, like the 2 acts. Like you see them, like, or Sherlock like thinking back, and he's like, it's got to be him. Like it's the exact same thing that happened on the boat. And I think Sherlock is starting to put the pieces together of like, it has to be William Moriarty. It can't be anybody else, because he's the only one on the boat who was smart enough to pull that off. And at the end of the episode, we do see Moriarty looking through the window, watching the guy who he's setting up. And Moriarty says, like, I'm using him to see if Sherlock is who he says he is. Like, or not so much is who he says he is, but if Sherlock is going to be a threat. If Sherlock is going to be as smart as he says he is. And that's so cool. Like, I absolutely love that, right? Again, this is also showing, because I've seen a lot of people like being sort of upset that Moriarty in the anime is depicted as being a little bit more altruistic than he is in the manga. And again, y'all know me, hashtag JoJo doesn't read. That will haunt me to the end of my days, but still, I know a lot of people are upset because apparently in the manga, the Moriarty crew is a lot more sort of like flippant with who they kill and who they don't, as long as it justifies the end goals. I like the way it's done here. Like, I do respect if that's not what you wanted, but I like a more altruistic Moriarty. I think it makes the character a little bit more interesting to me than just a bad guy. However, I can see the exact opposite being true as well. Like, I can see a lot of people saying it is more interesting that he does do the things that he does, because like it shows that like his dedication to his cause is so much more like intense, or whatever reason. You can sound off in the comments about it if you feel like it. But yeah, I do respect where people are coming from, where they wanted a more darker, the manga's more darker take on Moriarty. But I like this. I like this sort of altruistic Moriarty, but you do get that flash of the darker Moriarty here, where he's willing to let this dude kill somebody and walk into a dark situation just to get Sherlock. And I think that that's really cool. Like, I think that adding that layer of like, don't get us wrong, Moriarty's still the villain, right? Like, he's the villain of the general Sherlock mythos, right? Like, when we talk about Sherlock Holmes, we always point to Moriarty as the villain, right? He is one of the great fictional villains in general, right? Of anything ever. Like, Moriarty's the villain. He's not like the villain in all of literature. I'm just saying he's one of them. But yeah, like, I like seeing this other side to Moriarty. I think it makes the character more interesting if there's this other side, where we see that he did have good intentions, it's just that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I think it's really interesting, and I'm very excited to see where we go next week. I'm just very excited for more of the Sherlock crew next week. I will say, I do miss the Moriarty crew, like, more than I thought I would. Again, I'm very excited to see the Sherlock crew. It just makes me very happy. But I am getting very attached to the Moriarty crew, so hopefully we see them again soon. And with that said, everybody, that is going to wrap up today's video here, so I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to boop that up snoot, share if you care, leave a comment down below, and of course, hit that subscribe button and ring that bell, set notifications to all, let all of AniTube know that you're here. And of course, as always, I have to give a big thank you to the good folks in the T Squadron. Look at these beautiful people, look at all these beautiful names, and hey, if you would like to join these beautiful people, there are 2 ways to do so. The first is by hitting that Patreon link in the description, and the second is by hitting that join button right beside the sub button to get a badge next to your name, some emotes to spam in the comments, and of course your name scrolling past the screen here. So if that sounds cool to you, go ahead and hit that join button or check out the Patreon link. Either way, it is super, super appreciated. So once again, a big thank you to the good folks of the T Squadron, but that is gonna do it for today's video. So until next time, you stay classy on YouTube, and you wash your dang hands.